Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens has seen his average draft position rise almost 20 spots in one single month, and yet Kate and I are still buying. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we'd want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also read me at the 33rd Team. Today, joining me, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can read her at Pro Football Focus and Behind the Steel Curtain. On today's show, we're taking a look at three players who have seen a pretty significant rise in their ADP over the last month that we are still buying at their current price tag. And Kate, let's start with George Pickens, who is up 17 spots from May to June. Are you still buying at players 36 overall?
I'm still buying. And here's the thing, Marcus. I look at George Pickens. I look at what we've seen out of him so far. And admittedly, as a Steelers fan, I think he's lacked some of that, every down type of reliability. And a big part of that, I don't think, has been helped by the overall trajectory of this offense under Matt Canada, right? This was not a team that was running routes over the middle of the field. This was a team setting up George Pickens to run along the absolute barrier, right? With absolutely no potential for yards after the catch because everything was a sideline play, right? And then you have George Pickens, who, like, his play style can be complementary to that. He's a big splash play wide receiver, averaged over 17 yards per reception this season, despite being in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. The upside is so tremendous. But again, you have to be so forgiving of the offense he's played in to this point in his career. The quarterbacks with which he's played, he just got a big upgrade in Russell Wilson, who complements his skill set absolutely perfectly with his proficiency as a passer deep down the field. And then, Marcus, can we just talk about George Pickens, the prospect? Because coming out of Georgia, injuries kind of derailed that overall, possible draft stock as like the number one wide receiver in his respective class. But can we just go back to his freshman year at Georgia, 2019, as a true freshman, 727 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. He was so dominant. And again, there have just been so many things that I think have kept him from reaching his true ceiling as a wide receiver one. But I think that's all going to change this year.
At least we're on plan or on track to have him be the wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. There's a lot to like here. But let's first just look at the overall ADP. It's gone up pretty steadily since the end of the 2022 season. Now, there's been some dips and valleys, but we're talking about, for the most part, generally going up. And this is the highest it's been, I believe, ever, now at 36 overall. Pretty incredible. 36 overall, 46 overall player right now on Dynasty League football. I love the talent, okay? There's no question to me, he is a very talented player. And assuming he is the wide receiver one, I think he fits with both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. We saw Cortland Sutton, who I think is a similar player. I don't think they're identical, but a similar player, have a really good season last year. And if there's one thing that Justin Fields does really well, it's throw the deep ball. And he's going to take shot after shot down the field, which obviously lends to, helping out the skill set of George Pickens. My only concern, by the way, I'm buying, just to be clear, I'm still buying George Pickens at this price. My only concern, Kate, is that it's it appears the Steelers are really flirting with the idea of trying to go out and get another receiver, whether it's Brandon Ayuk, who has been in the news for the last 3 months as a potential target. There were some rumblings that during the draft, Pittsburgh had a deal done with the 49ers for one of their receivers, but couldn't quite agree on the contract with the new receiver. There's been some other rumblings about maybe DK Metcalf, maybe Cortland Sutton. I just wonder if Pittsburgh has some hesitations about giving George Pickens a long-term deal, which would obviously hurt his dynasty value.
I do think, though, the fact that they traded away Deontay Johnson, who I think you know who Deontay Johnson is as a receiver. I think they were very comfortable with his skill set. But I do think from, a locker room standpoint that they looked at George Pickens as the guy that they thought was the better overall fit for their culture. And I do think that does make a difference. That move to trade away Deontay Johnson when they, definitely could have gotten much better value out of George Pickens, right, in a trade. They traded away Deontay Johnson for a song. They, Dante Jackson, a really old cornerback. Like, it's not like they really gained much in terms of the trade of Deontay Johnson. I think that speaks a lot in terms of what I feel is their overall view. But Marcus, let's say even if they bring in a sort of volume-based wide receiver, we saw George Pickens be surprisingly efficient in some metrics that are pretty important and are pretty, just overall predictive of a wide receiver's success. 2.05 yards per route run. That ranked 21st among 133 wide receivers, which I think is, again, just absolutely incredible considering this was not an offense that was productive in terms of total yardage.
Correct.
8th out of 90 qualified wide receivers when looking at yards after the catch per reception, 6.1 yards after the catch per reception. That ranked 91st percentile among all wide receivers last year. Again, despite the fact that schematically, this was not an offense that was set up to maximize yards after the catch because it was so many sideline grabs. Like, George Pickens has an incredibly, incredibly high ceiling. The biggest concern is definitely the floor. But again, we're looking at a wide receiver that had 5 games of 100+ receiving yards last season. In 3 of those, he scored 1 or more touchdowns. And let's be honest, a few of those came without Kenny Pickett at quarterback. Yep. Kenny Pickett is no longer a part of this mix. I just think the ceiling,
thank goodness for you,
get with George Pickens at the end of the 3rd round, early 4th round in a dynasty startup draft. Like, I do think he has true wide receiver 1 upside. I think the only reason people aren't more in on him, despite coming off an 1,140 yard season, 5 touchdowns. Like, I think the reason that people aren't more in on George Pickens for the price is just that concern about like whether or not they bring in a number 1 wide receiver. Yeah. But again, he accomplished all of that and had a pretty high ceiling despite technically being the number 2 target on his respective offense. Like, if he does, reign as the number 1, I think you're going to get a perennial top 12 wide receiver. And maybe I'm just being too bullish, but
let's go through some names that are being drafted around George Pickens just to show where we kind of value him at right now. So actually, George Pickens and Zay Flowers, 2 AFC North receivers, have almost identical ADPs right now. Which one do you prefer?
I'm going to take George Pickens all day, okay. Who I really like. Zay Flowers, love what we saw out of him as a rookie. He's also, he's in a good offense. He's in an offense that I think we're all more confident in terms of both their safety level and upside. But like, I still look at George Pickens as a wide receiver that I truly think has wide receiver 1 upside. He's more of that prototypical build. But yeah, I'm just going to take the higher upside that I think George Pickens has.
Let's run through a couple of these really quickly. DJ Moore, wide receiver 20 right now.
I'll take George Pickens.
Okay. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 19.
George Pickens.
I would take Pickens as well. Michael Pittman, wide receiver 18. Just got a new deal.
But is in an offense very, very a deep offense, I think, with a lot of talent, I think say George Pickens, because while Mike, it depends on the construction of your team, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking for a guy who I think is not going to lose you a week, it's going to be Michael Pittman. But if you're looking for more upside, I think it's Pickens.
Last one. Devontae Smith, wide receiver 17.
Oh, George Pickens, easily.
All right, maybe not last one. Rhamondre, wide receiver 16.
No, I got to go with my guy,
Okay,
Rome.
there we go.
That's where I draw a firm line at Rhamondre.
So we're all the way up to wide receiver 15, wide receiver 16 for George Pickens, which shows we still believe that he is a screaming value in your dynasty leagues. Okay, let's talk about a running back who just got a nice contract extension last week. Should you still be buying Rhamondre Stevenson after getting the bag? We'll discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I absolutely love sports. It's the reason why I host 2 podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But unfortunately, the NHL playoffs are over, the NBA playoffs are over, and now we're getting fewer and fewer games. And the sports just aren't sporting like we'd like them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's talk about Rhamondre Stevenson, who got a nice little contract extension, from the New England Patriots. We've seen his ADP rise up several spots over the last month. Are you still buying Rhamondre at RB 20?
There's definitely a lot of question marks here about the New England Patriots, what this offense is going to look like. But the fact that they have so many question marks within their entire organization, virtually no depth at the wide receiver position, or perhaps probably too much depth and not enough at the top. Like the fact that they went ahead and paid Rhamondre Stevenson a 4-year, $36 million contract that makes him among one of the top paid running backs in terms of average annual value. Like, I got to admit, I was a little bit floored, and it does make me kind of look at Rhamondre Stevenson with a peaked interest, right? So over the past 3 seasons, ranks 13th among 69 qualifying running backs in PFF rushing grade, 64th percentile in missed forced tackles per attempt, 87th percentile in yards after contact per attempt. He's been heavily involved as a receiver, which we know is very conducive to, adding just an extra level of safety as well as upside in terms of your overall fantasy scoring. Money talks.
Mm-hmm.
I think we probably have to be a little bit intrigued with Rhamondre Stevenson value right now, even though there are some red flags. Like, he's 26 years old, right? He hasn't been the healthiest, but I do think, especially when it comes to the running back position, following money, generally it talks, especially at a position where you literally design touches for those respective players.
And what do we say about the running back position generally when it comes to Dynasty League football? This is a 12-month business, right? Like,
every running back is a loaner.
Yes. The fact that the Patriots were willing to go out and give Rhamondre Stevenson more money beyond the 2024 season means that they feel pretty good about him. So I think obviously you get him this year as a full-time starter. You'll get him next year as a full-time starter at the bare minimum, right, Kate? there's only so many running backs that you can kind of lock into a starting job for the next 2 years. And I know this New England offense is not good. And maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll be a little bit closer to league average. Maybe Bill Belichick gone will open this offense up. We'll see. But there's not a lot of competition for touches. The top backup behind Rhamondre is Antonio Gibson, who I like, but I mean, he's a gadget part-time player. There's nobody that's going to steal the goal line touches. I still think Rhamondre might be the best receiving or running back on this roster. He's going to play on passing downs. I think at RB20, he's a big value.
And here's what I do think is important. So like when thinking about money talks, right? And I do think that's very important. One recent example of that not panning out was Miles Sanders, but signed a big contract with the Panthers. And I think that that's probably the best example people are going to, point to when they say like, well, money doesn't always talk. That was a guy that they brought in from outside of the organization. That, the fact that they paid this running back who they are familiar with, that they know the new coaching staff is familiar with. Like, remember, they promoted from within once Bill Belichick departed the organization. This wasn't a new face who's, newly evaluating this roster. I do think there's something to be said for this money. And again, I just think there's really such limited competition. Antonio Gibson, for, the fact that he probably is going to be more of a third down role. I still think Rhamondre Stevenson is the overall better receiving running back. And he's more of a threat on any given down for, what you're going to get out of him as a pure runner. I'm kind of surprised at how intrigued I am by Rhamondre Stevenson at this point. But again, like you had mentioned, you're looking at every one of these running backs as a 1 to 2 year option. And that's how you have to approach that position. You draft your wide receivers for longevity and stability. You draft your running backs to maximize on touches, right? We talked about just last week or the week before, I'm losing track of my time now, but we talked about what makes an RB1, and the ticker was the ticker was touches. Like, you might be somewhat inefficient with those touches, but the key is just getting touches. And that payday tells me that they're planning to get Rhamondre Stevenson touches, which I'm all in on.
All right, let's talk about some running backs that Rhamondre has jumped in terms of average draft position over the last month. He has jumped the likes of Najee Harris, Samir White, Javonte Williams, Jalen Warren, Alvin Kamara, and now David Montgomery, although that one's pretty darn close. Here are a couple running backs, Kate, that are currently being drafted ahead of Rhamondre that I want your thoughts on. Rhamondre or Joe Mixon, now with the Texans?
Easily Rhamondre Stevenson.
I actually struggle with this one a little bit because we talked about touches, and who else is going to get touches?
Joe Mixon is the perfect example of a very inefficient running back who gets a lot of touches. But again, I don't necessarily know that he's in the long-term plans of the Houston Texans. And I think if you're looking from a longevity standpoint, that you might get another year out of Rhamondre Stevenson that you're probably not going to get out of Joe Mixon. And maybe this is my bias against Joe Mixon.
DeAndre Swift, RB 18.
This one's pretty hard for me because I think DeAndre Swift is the better overall running back on the better offense. I'm probably going to go with DeAndre Swift here, but that's close.
I think I would take Stevenson, but I agree with you. That one's close. I think I would just take whoever's cheaper in that case. And then after DeAndre, there's a pretty big gap in terms of ADP. The next running back, RB 17, is Derrick Henry, but you're also looking at a 30-year-old running back on a new team. How much goal line work does he get? I don't know, but I think most people would probably just rather gamble on Derrick Henry having a renaissance season in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think definitely if you're in a win now position, 100%, you've got to take the swing on Derrick Henry, who, maybe he has 250 touches this year, but they're probably going to be pretty
He could have 15 touchdowns. Like he could be remember that year when Lamar won the MVP, Mark Ingram had like 15, 16 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to shock anybody if Derrick Henry has a similar type of season.
Mhm.
And I think Mark Ingram is a little bit younger, but not really. So I think I would stick with Henry there.
Yeah.
All right, Kate, let's go over and talk about another running back who is significantly more expensive than Rhamondre Stevenson, who he keeps seeing his price tag go up and up and up. Let's talk about Jonathon Brooks next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are discussing the biggest ADP risers from the month of May to June. Okay, let's talk about Jonathon Brooks, who we absolutely love, who continues to see his price tag go up and up. Now, I will tell you, if you've been listening to the show for the last couple of months, you know that we've been telling you to buy Jonathon Brooks because his ADP is only going to go up the closer that we get to the season. And that's been the case. He's up to RB11 right now, passing Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Rachaad White, Josh Jacobs. Are you buying Jonathon Brooks at RB11 still?
Yeah, but the good news is I was already buying when he was still like, I don't know, RB20. So I don't mean to brag, but I got a little ahead of the situation. But I do still think he's absolutely worth that price tag. And I think he's absolutely a lock as a top 10 dynasty running back. So not necessarily when you look at his value in 2024, are you going to be overly excited, right? He's coming off this torn ACL, probably going to be ready for training camp, but hasn't been able to integrate into this offense. Unfortunately, hasn't been able to get these, kind of critical reps that are important as a rookie. But like, generally speaking, there was not a running back that had a more well-rounded skill set, a true 3-down skill set. He can do the first and second down work. He's an excellent pass blocker. He's an excellent receiver. I mean, Marcus, there wasn't much that you didn't like coming out of Texas. 91st percentile in PFF rushing grade, 95th percentile in missed forced tackles per attempt, 82nd percentile yards after contact per attempt. Like, dude absolutely crushed pretty much every efficiency metric, despite not even getting to play out the rest of his season due to that torn ACL. And yet, despite that, still seeing that monstrous increase in value. I just think you're getting in on any of these Carolina Panthers, which, like, how good do you project the Carolina Panthers offense? Nobody's going to say a top 10 offense, right? But I don't think they're going to be a bottom 5 offense. So, like, you're getting in at the ground level here with all of these assets, but especially Jonathon Brooks, who I think was the most talented running back in this draft class.
So this is where it gets a little hard because for the most part, if you're drafting Jonathon Brooks, you're drafting him in a rookie draft and not in a startup draft. Because at least in the startup drafts that I've been in, you actually can draft the rookie picks and not the players. And then you have your rookie draft later in the process. But let's say your draft has already happened or it's coming up. How are you valuing Jonathon Brooks? Well, if you're playing in a super flex draft, Jonathon Brooks is being drafted around pick 11, right? You have players like Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Brock Bowers that are all going ahead of him. I'm just trying to get that pick like crazy. I'll give up whatever I need to give up to get pick 110, pick 111 to get Jonathon Brooks, because in my mind, that's a top 10 running back. And Kate, I can promise you, the moment that he plays his first snap in the NFL, I don't even care how it goes. We're going to see him being valued as a top 8 dynasty running back. So I still think even with the ADP going way up, the closer that we get to him playing, the more that ADP is going to rise. I still think there's value to be had.
Definitely still value to be had. So let's talk about some of the names that are being drafted around Jonathon Brooks. Let's say you're in a dynasty startup with the rookies actually like in the draft, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So let's name some names here. I'm going to go from players being drafted just behind him, and then we'll work our way up the list here. James Cook currently being valued RB14.
I would rather have Jonathon Brooks. You're just getting like 4 years younger at the running back position, and that matters so much. And I like James Cook a lot.
Rachaad White.
Oh, not even. That one's not close to me. That's Jonathon.
It's laughable. It's so these are getting like less.
James Cook is close.
We're moving off the list, but
we're just not big Rachaad White fans, I guess.
No. Again, one of those very inefficient running backs that got a lot of touches, and that served its purpose. But if I can move on for, Rashad White and trade him for Jonathon Brooks, maybe Rashad White and a third
Whatever you
round
need.
pick next year for Jonathon Brooks, I'm doing that all day. Isaiah Pacheco, RB 12.
Oh, that one's not that close. I've much
Not
rather
even
have-
close for me.
No.
Kenneth Walker, RB 10.
That one's close. I would prefer Walker, but it's close for me.
Here's the thing. You have Kenneth Walker, but you have Kenneth Walker in a new offense with a new head coach, a new group of people that are assessing him, in addition to Zach Charbonnet, who was one of my favorite running backs in last year's draft class. So, we don't necessarily know how that's going to play out. I think Kenneth Walker, a better pure runner. Jonathon Brooks, I think, is a better receiver than Kenneth Walker. It has more upside in that regard. I'm probably just going to take Jonathon Brooks with the knowledge that he has a lot less competition for touches. Devin Achane, RB9, who I've been #skeptical of here.
I'll take Achane.
No.
I mean, listen.
Not even close for me. Not even close.
Here's what I will say. To me, that one depends almost entirely on who your RB1 is. Like, if I have Bijan Robinson and I'm looking for my RB2, I would rather have Devin Achane as my RB2 than Jonathon Brooks, because I'm okay living with some of the up and down. But if I'm looking at these two guys and they're going to be my RB1, yeah, I have to go Jonathon Brooks ahead of Achane. Have to.
So that definitely depends on your situation, how you approach the draft.
Yes.
But if you are drafting, unless you went, in your dynasty startup, RB, and you can stack Achane with one of these top other options, I do think you have to go with Jonathon Brooks as your RB1.
Yes.
Last one that I think we're probably on the edge would be Saquon Barkley, age 27, heading into a new offense with the Philadelphia Eagles, which we know isn't a high upside one. But you have Jalen Hurts, who is going to steal some touchdowns. He's gonna do it. He's gonna hurt you.
That one's
I don't
hard.
know. I think you can you can make an argument that Jonathon Brooks should be drafted ahead of Saquon Barkley.
So Kate, you and I were in a dynasty draft together last month, and I actually was forced, or I had this decision. I needed a running back. I took Barkley over Brooks, and I've been kind of regretting it ever since. Now, I think you can make a good argument either way. I'm trying to be more competitive right now, and that's why I took Barkley. But in hindsight, I think I wish I would have taken Brooks.
And I do think that's probably the deciding factor, right? I think you could realistically rank Jonathon Brooks anywhere up to RB8, but it depends on, again, kind of, your approach, right? If you're looking for production predominantly in the 2024 season, you're looking at a 1-year upside player, you're probably going to lean Barkley. If you are looking for longevity, I think you have to go with Jonathon Brooks.
I don't even think it's a question.
It's a great, I think, exercise because the more you think through it, I do think that the answer is more often Jonathon Brooks than you would have expected.
We're not that far away from Jonathon Brooks being a top 8 running back, and I'll bet by the time we get to September, he's pretty comfortably there. He'll pass some of those other names like Devon Achane, like Isaiah Pacheco. So just go by now before it happens. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Every dayers. On tomorrow's show, we'll have Matt Williamson here answering your Twitter questions. So make sure you send them into us at Marcus_Mosher, at Kate Maljuk, at Williamson NFL. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.